Dear representatives of media, good afternoon. Welcome to the press conference. We will start with the statement of the Foreign Affairs Minister of Latvia, Edgars Rinkēvičs, following the meeting between the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Latvia and Denmark. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. After a summer break, we are resuming our regular meetings, and I just had a meeting with my Danish counterpart and also met with the parliamentarians who accompanied him on his visit to Latvia. We discussed both bilateral relations as well as regional security, and my colleague will also visit the Danish troops at the Camp Ardaže, and on behalf of Latvia I thanked Denmark for speedy decision to increase its military presence in scope of NATO after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. More than 800 troops from Denmark arrived, thus showing the political and practical support to Latvia. We also talked about further support to Ukraine, especially during the winter season, both in military and financial terms. In this regard, we will need to introduce additional restrictive measures against Russia, and in this regard we share a similar opinion within the European Union and NATO. We are, of course, very well aware that this is a situation that will most probably last some time. Therefore, we need to have the strategic resilience or some redundancy in this regard. We have to take into account that we will not be able to overcome Russia that easily, but we also how we should continue explaining to our people and raising the awareness among people how important it is to work in scope of NATO and nationally to stop the aggression and push back Russian forces. And of course we also, I should say, talked about other regions of the world. We both agreed that we need to continue supporting our eastern partners. We need to continue also focusing on Western Balkans to avoid Western Balkans falling into crisis, and we must make sure that the EU stands by its commitments. But we also expect from the candidate countries full compliance or adherence with the political decisions of the European Union, and we expect them to support these decisions. And I'm of course talking about Serbia in particular. In this case we had a very productive, very constructive meeting, so thank you Jeppe for that, and I would like to thank also the Danish parliamentarians for visiting Latvia and for support. Now it's over to you.
Much, Edgars. I'm very pleased to be here, also with the Parliament delegation from Denmark. And I always enjoy visiting your country, you know that. We have good relations with Latvia, and it's not only personal. Our two countries have very close bonds and a common and long history together. Actually, last year, Denmark and Latvia celebrated over 100th anniversary of our bilateral diplomatic relations. At the same time, we celebrated 30th anniversary of the re-establishment of our relations. And our meeting today also reflects these strong bonds that we have bilaterally. And of course, we discussed also how to strengthen our relationship even further in the future. We have just spent 2 days together in Lithuania, where we have had a very, I think, constructive meetings with our Baltic and Nordic friends. And our meetings in Lithuania and our meetings today show that we continue to stand together to protect and promote our democratic values and rule-based order, which are under threat. These values are now more important than ever. And as a victim of the crimes committed by the Soviet Union, Latvia knows this better than anyone. And I'm also proud to remind you that Denmark never recognized the Soviet Union's annexation of Latvia. And I want to stress that we will not accept Putin's attempt to move international borders with military force. So today we also discussed the Russian unprovoked and illegal war of aggression in Ukraine. The invasion has fundamentally changed the security situation in Europe, and Putin has clearly demonstrated that he is a threat to its neighbors. A threat that I know you take very seriously here in Latvia. Not only do you have an aggressive and imperialistic neighbor to the east, you also have Belarus to the south, who is enabling Putin in his disgraceful behavior against Ukraine. So our response has been strong. It has been crucial that we have stood together and stand together in NATO, that we acted to protect our common values, but also security and safety. And I'm happy for our common response so far. And I'm also very happy that Denmark has contributed to this by sending 800 soldiers to Latvia. They are an important part of what we think is important of strengthening NATO's deterrence and defense profile in the Baltic Sea region, our eastern posture here. And we are sending a clear signal to Putin that NATO will always protect every corner of Allied territory. And we will send a signal as long as needed. So I want to say, Edgar, we must continue to stand together. We have a lot of work together. We also know we have an energy issue that we have to resolve in Europe together, and Denmark here will be happy to be a strong partner with Latvia on that field as well. Thank you.
Paldies, ministra kungam.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. We now open the floor for questions. Ina Strasdiņa from the Latvian television. Go ahead. Good afternoon, Ina Strasdiņa from the Latvian television. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to ask the question. I would like to ask Mr. Kofod. Yesterday, Jens Stoltenberg, NATO Secretary General, published his article in Financial Times where he claims that if we don't help Ukraine, Russia might attack other neighbors or other NATO member states. Your troops are currently now at Camp Ardaj here in Latvia. Are you ready for such a scenario, direct threat to Latvia, because we are neighboring with Russia and we are also NATO member states, so we are thus sort of falling into his claims. And if I may, I would like to also ask the second question. Mr. Nikevich mentioned that you discussed assistance to Ukraine during a winter period, which is going to be very tough this year. So what did you mean by that exactly, and how Denmark is going to cope with this winter, because I suppose many European countries will find it tough this winter?
Well, thank you so much. First of all, what we saw the 24th of February in Ukraine with the Russian aggression and attempt to invade Ukraine by the use of force is a stark reminder for all of us in Europe, and especially also, of course, here in the Baltic, but also other places, that we cannot take our security, our respect of our national sovereignty and territorial integrity for granted. We need to ensure that we can protect ourselves against any aggression from the Russian side. So in that sense, I very much agree with Stoltenberg, Secretary General, that we need to take the necessary measures, and that is why Denmark is strongly supporting a strong deterrence and also military posture in the eastern flank of NATO, including, of course, in Latvia and the other Baltic states. And therefore, we have now 800 troops here. And for Denmark, a small country, it is actually a huge contribution that we have, and it's reflecting the reality. And I also want to say, if you look at what Putin had said over the years, we must not be naive. I mean, this neo-imperialistic approach to the world we have to take it serious to counter that in every aspect. Militarily, of course, through NATO and our support to Ukraine, but also in all other fields. So Denmark is in favor of the strongest response that can eventually defeat that type of thinking that neo-imperialism Putin is showing with his neo-imperialistic thinking, and we have to defeat that. and we will do it with any means. Secondly, question on the winter coming up. There are two aspects to it. Firstly, in Europe, we need to prepare, and we are prepared, both in the short and longer run, because we need to be 100% independent of Russian fossil fuel. It makes gas, coal, oil, and we need to rapidly speed up, of course, ensuring in the short term that we have the necessary stocks of energy so we can provide energy in the winter, but also in the longer term to transform our energy system, invest heavily in renewable energy. We just had a Baltic Sea summit on wind, where we showcased that there's a lot of wind resources here that can provide energy for all of us in the Baltic Sea, for example. We did the same in the North Sea before the summer. So we have to rapidly change our energy system, and also we have to look at energy efficiency. So that's something we want to do. And also on energy prices, we need to work together in Europe to find a way so people can afford energy in the wintertime. That's Europe. But in Ukraine, we have also, from the Danish side, give immediate humanitarian aid to prepare the population for the winter, especially in Mykolaiv, which is a city we were asked by President Zelensky to do special coordination for. So there we are supplying, help. So they have restored water systems, electricity. They have window shields, so windows that have been broken due to the war, so they can keep warm in the winter. So immediate humanitarian aid was something we have done to Ukraine. So we all need to prepare for the winter, and I think we are on the way, but we are not there yet.
As regards how to help Ukraine this winter, and how should Latvia prepare for this winter? Well, one of our top priorities is all possible support to Ukraine, military support and supply of weapons and arms in order for Ukraine to successfully push back Russia and regain control of its territories, to restore its control over its territories, and for people to return to formerly occupied areas. We need to provide them military support, weapons, military equipment, and we will continue to do that until Ukraine succeeds. Many countries have done a lot to help Ukraine, but the war is not over yet. So that is something that you should bear in the back of your mind. As regards to winter, in particular, we need to provide also macro-financial support to Ukraine so that its government can take care of the main needs of the country in terms of education and other needs. So European Union and other like-minded countries, including G7 countries, should support Ukrainian government as much as possible with funding, with providing the necessary funding for these basic government functions. We've already made the first transfers, but it is obvious that we will need to continue supporting Ukraine further financially, and we will also have to find additional funding to help Ukraine. Thirdly, beyond any doubt, as regards to these territories, it is not only about winter. We need to help Ukraine restore its hospitals, kindergartens and schools. As you know, on Tuesday we reviewed an information note regarding €5 million support for the Chernihiv region, with whom we have had cooperation over a longer period. Latvia alone, of course, will not be able to fully, help with all the needs that the region has, but also at the meeting of the ministers, we also talked about intensifying various projects that we are involved in order to focus not only on one region but also in other regions, so that we don't leave any regions of Ukraine out in terms of our support. That's as far as Ukraine is concerned. As regards to energy and European Union, I can only echo what my colleagues said. We need to find solutions at the European Union level, or individual countries alone will not be able to solve all their problems for this winter, and that the European meetings, and today also we discussed that we need to find a consensus at the European level. As we did during the financial crisis, we also found solutions eventually that were efficient for overcoming COVID, and the discussion wasn't easy, but we succeeded. And we should also find the ways to reduce the energy prices at the European level, and solidarity payments out of the profit of various companies that are providing energy should be funneled into supporting those who need it the most, because everyone will possibly need the support. There are no sort of more or less vulnerable groups when it comes to this energy crisis. I mean, this energy crisis will hit all groups of our society. So that is what I wanted to underline. And I'm absolutely certain that the discussion on the energy policy, on centralized procurement of LNG, and also greater use of renewables through solar panels, wind energy, also discussion on nuclear energy should, I believe, be much broader when it comes to European Union solutions. And like in the case of vaccines, the European Commission should probably give us more leeway when it comes to negotiating gas prices, favourable gas prices. So these are my just ideas for tomorrow's meeting. Tomorrow there will be an informal meeting of the energy ministers of the European Union level. I don't expect any specific decisions tomorrow. I do believe that they will talk about some sort of discussion paper for the European leaders, but a policy change is needed at the European Union level, and broader involvement of different stakeholders is necessary. We will not be able to deal with this alone, not even Germany. Thank you, ministers. We have a question from Danish journalists.
I would like to ask both ministers of foreign affairs if we can expect a NATO military presence, or like more military presence in the near future in Latvia.
Yes, the answer is very short. I think that the Madrid summit decisions have been very clear on this. We are working currently with a framework nation, Canada, and all countries, including Denmark, that is present here, on some homeworks. We need more infrastructure here. The Defense Ministry of Latvia is already working to build new base and training range. We also understand that it's not what you can do in a couple of weeks or even months, because that's a long-term engagement, but our goal is brigade-level NATO presence in Latvia. And actually, one thing, you will be all visiting Adaži base later today, meeting also Danish soldiers, but one thing that is also very important, we are hosting the multinational division North, and I think that also this division as the command element should be strengthened, and also that could play a very critical role in more enhanced presence of allies here on Latvian soil.
Well, yeah, I can echo what my colleague just said. We took a very important decision at the Madrid summit in late June to strengthen NATO's military posture in the eastern flank, and due to, of course, the insecurity that the Russian invasion of Ukraine has caused, and therefore we will now build up our eastern flank. We will have more troops, we will have more assets. We work very closely with Latvia, and Latvia is a great host country also for that. And I think the important part here is that we will do that because there is a very different security situation in Europe now after the brutal invasion. And this war in Ukraine from the Russian side, it probably can last a long time if Russia continues with his illegal activities and war, and we need to prepare for the long haul here. And NATO, it's important to strengthen NATO so we can deter any threats to any inch of NATO territory, and that's why we will do it here in the northeast, but also in the southeast. Generally, I think that allies in NATO are standing together more closely than ever, and we are also very pleased and happy that Sweden and Finland is on the way to fully join NATO, and they will also strengthen our security in our part of Europe.
Paldies ministra kungam. Vai
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Do we have any other questions? Yes, all this Arbolinch from TV3. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to ask a question. Baltic countries have agreed on banning visas, Schengen visas for the Russian nationals. Would like to ask the Danish minister, what is the position of Denmark regarding the movement of Russian citizens in Europe, and are you considering any bans on, visas for Russians? And a question to Mr. Rinkevich, is it enough for the Baltic countries to introduce such a ban, or would other countries need to introduce this ban, and what will the Baltic countries do to persuade others to introduce this ban?
Well, thank you. A very important question. And let me start by saying and underlining that to us, to the Danish government, to Denmark, it is a provocation that tourism and a number of crossings of citizens of Russian Federation that is having tourism in Europe, holding their vacations in southern France or drinking coffee in capitals and cafes in Europe, while at the same time Russia is illegally, brutally invading Ukraine and destroying Ukrainian cities and killing Ukrainians. I think that has to call for reaction. Nothing is normal in Europe after this invasion. Therefore, it has to have consequences for Russia, for Putin and his regime. Therefore, we were and are in favor of first of all, full suspension of the visa facilitation agreement between the Russian Federation and EU, like we decided, or we backed in our informal meeting, cabinet meeting among foreign ministers in the EU. Secondly, we have in Denmark then also strengthened our own visa application process. So de facto, it will be very difficult to obtain a visa. It's not, we do not ban, because there can be justifiable reasons for getting a visa also to Denmark, but we have made it much more difficult, also putting Russia into a category which you have to apply, and you have to go to thorough evaluation before you are granted a visa. So if there are the right purposes, of course, we will still have the opportunity to grant a visa. But there's no doubt what we have decided will, dramatically limit the number of new Schengen visas, which is the purpose. And we also think we should look at the current Schengen visas that are still valid and see how we can evaluate them. So we need a tough line on this. At the same time, we need to, of course, help the ones who are against the Russian war in Ukraine. We need to help journalists, human rights defenders, dissidents of Russia, and we will find ways to do that at the same time. So it's a dual approach, but we have strengthened our visa regime dramatically in Denmark as well.
Paldies.
Thank you. I would say that this is a question that consists of two parts. It's about issuing visas, and as is the case usually with European policies, you never arrive at decision at the first go. You have to go through a thorough discussion, of course, apart from sanctions, following the Russian invasion of Ukraine, because we already had sanction package prepared in advance, so to say. From our perspective, the agreement reached last week to stop issuing EU visas or suspend the visa facilitation treaty or the agreement between EU and Russia was absolutely correct, because that allows us to control and limit the issuing of the short-term Schengen visas to Russian nationals. So it was a right step. Usually, visa facilitation allows you to access visa quicker than, in a regular procedure where you have to go through additional checks. But this is only the first step, and we'll continue discussing other restrictions. And last week, as my colleague Jeppe also mentioned, we are waiting for the Commission analysis on what to do with the already issued Schengen visas, because there's a huge number of those visas. We cannot just revoke them just by one political decision or a regulation. There are legal and technical implications involved, and views also differ, but we'll continue negotiating and discussing this with other like-minded countries in order to resolve this question at the European Union level. And then there's also the decision, the bold step taken by the Baltic countries yesterday that we are going to implement. So we will significantly reduce the visas or the travelling possibilities for those Russian nationals that are holding the EU visas. We will not allow them to cross our border. That's a national decision. It is up to other countries to decide whether it fits them or not. But we think that this is a relatively efficient step. Finland, Baltic countries and Poland that have direct EU external border with Belarus and Russia, which are used, by the Russian nationals to enter the European Union. They needed this step because the number of travellers increased quite significantly from Russia in recent weeks. And last week, at the meeting of the ministers, we reached a rather good understanding that countries bordering with Russia due to security and other reasons, and also political and military reasons, should be allowed to take more drastic steps. And we will most probably will have to continue discussing on whether these measures should be scaled up to other countries as well. But from a political, moral point of view and security point of view, we needed to take these steps. I'm talking about Baltic countries, and we'll continue this discussion debate at the EU level. We are firmly committed to moving this issue forward. Thank you, ministers. Thank you all. This concludes our press conference. Thank you very much. Goodbye. Have a nice day.